Along the rivers that flowed through the heart and history of Fluvanna, early settlements grew into farms and plantations. Crops thrived, families prospered. Canal boats and bateaux took their harvest to local mills and further markets downstream. By 1760, a family named Haden arrived, and 3 generations later, William Douglas Haden farmed 1,000 acres overlooking the Rivanna River. This is the story of his legacy, the house at Pleasant Grove.
I'm Marvin. I'm president of the Fluvanna Historical Society and the Fluvanna Heritage Trail Foundation. The house was built in 1853 and 1854. It has very strange elements in it of architecture of previous periods, like the 9/9 windows and the mouse tooth corbelling along the roof line, and things of that nature, which had pretty much gone out of style by the time this house was being built. In architectural terms, they call it retardataire, which means old-fashioned, and so to a certain extent this house was old-fashioned. The other interesting thing about the house is that it has very large windows for a house of its size and period, and secondly, it has a hipped roof. It's the only house of this era in this area of Central Virginia that had a hipped roof. And by that, when you photograph it, you'll see what a hipped roof looks like. It's not a flat roof, and it's not a regular sloped roof, which most of the houses, including mine, had on it. We had to go very strongly in the direction of transportation history because we were applying for transportation enhancement grants, again from the Virginia Department of Transportation. So between Pat Groot, who was then the grants person for Fluvanna County, and myself, we raised over $870,000 from a series of about 7 grants for this project, which means that about 73% of the total cost of the restoration has been paid out of money that came from someone other than Fluvanna County. They almost immediately discovered that the Pleasant Grove house had no foundation, and they were putting an extension on it that was going to have a foundation. So you'd have a building that was sinking and a new building that wasn't sinking connected to each other. So they had to do extensive shoring up of the backside of the house. They, in essence, put in an artificial foundation next to the extension so that the 2 buildings would be structurally compatible and not cause problems down the line someplace. It turned out to be much more beautiful than I ever anticipated, I guess is the best way of putting it. But then again, you have to remember that most people in 1853 and 1854, when this house were built, lived either in log cabins or in very simple wooden 2/2s. This was a 2/2/2 because it has an English basement. So, and it was brick. The windows were quite large, which was extraordinarily expensive at the time. It was, by any stretch of the imagination in those days, a rather imposing residence, although not in comparison to some of the other houses in Fluvanna County.
Our role in the project, really, the county provided the content. Andy is a local writer, and she did the research and acquired all the images and wrote the text, and then we did all the design work. And so our challenge was to take this VDOT transportation story and put it into these two galleries and be respectful of the preservation of the historic building. The two challenges in this project were how to fill a room with flat text and images and make it have some relief and depth so that it was interesting without just being a book on the wall. And then of course the second part was how to put it in this room with all these windows and not cover up the windows or hang on the plaster walls or anything that would detract from the architectural part of the building. And so the solution turned out to be a series of platforms with the graphics set on these platforms and rails in front of the windows, and so you can see around them and through them. Personally, the story of the C&O is interesting because my design firm is in a C&O warehouse in Richmond, and the tracks run about 10 feet away from our office, so we're big train fans, and so that was an interesting part of it.
There are 14 homes, which is far greater than many would believe in such a very small county. We have a great many treasures here: Bremo Plantation and Bremo Farms, Glenarvin, Point of Fork, Glen Burnie, Carriesbrook, and a number of others. A particularly early home, Chatham, and then an even earlier home, which is a very simple 2/2 Gum Creek. And that is a James Dunlap Ross home, built for him by his father. That home still exists. It's a late 1700s home that has been virtually not improved upon other than necessities. And so you still feel the 18th century quality of the walls and certainly of the moldings and the wood, the outside, the inside, the exteriors. It's quite exquisite. Pleasant Grove is a very simple, in a sense, farmhouse in a Greek Revival style, but expanded with the really extraordinary windows. I do think about the Haden family, William Douglas Haden and his family, the number of children, and possible slavery, enslaved persons that he had to help. This was more of a farming area. This was an area in which they didn't have extraordinary wealth, but they had people to work the farm. They were close to the river, and that is the whole connection with the wonderful T21 VDOT enhancement grants that have helped show what the story is. And you think of this near 1,000-acre plantation and many others in the county. We know there was revolutionary history, certainly with the arsenal at Point of Fork. We know all about that. We know the Civil War was going on around Fluvanna. However, all the boys and men had gone to fight in the war. Who was left? The women and the children and the slaves. So they were carrying Fluvanna and protecting it, protecting themselves and their land, and trying to survive a ghastly civil war. So I think about them, I think about the children, and I think about this new house they have, and then all their men and boy children are gone, and how they continue to operate.
I'm Brian Coffield with the Virginia Canals and Navigation Society. That's the title I had when Jason Smith first contacted me about this project. Now I'm an employee of the Fluvanna County Parks and Recreation. The canal on the Rivanna River, it's like a lot of other canals on tributaries of the James River. It opens up these rural counties to give them a means by water to move mass quantities of farm goods, tobacco, and different things, that they milled and, just grew, to move them down to Richmond. And once you get things to Richmond, you put it on a ship, and then you can move it overseas to London. So I jokingly say to people that one time Palmyra was an international seaport. And that's not too much of a stretch, because if you imagine that it eventually evolved into canal transportation, and you could get on a canal boat in Palmyra and go to Richmond, and then it really would be considered an international seaport. But the one in Crofton is actually the entrance or exit, whatever direction you're traveling, to a proper canal that leads to the mill that was upstream there. Like you hear the famous James River plantations, and they took advantage of being right there on the James River. So this is what I want to start referring to as one of the famous Ravenna River plantations. You may have heard of some of the others, like Monticello, Shadwell, and of course Carsbrook, that is in Fluvanna County. So why not elevate our Ravenna River plantations to the level of the James River plantations? Maybe not as grand, but they were definitely here for the same reason and the same purpose. And land on the rivers was prime real estate. Well, this one's brought back to the view of the public of Fluvanna County, and now they can come here and see this perfectly preserved artifact, and they should be proud of this museum.
One of the pieces to the completion was working with the Department of Historical Resources, and because it's an historic facility and historic grounds, there are certain guidelines and stipulations that will dictate, this money's going towards this, so this is what DHR will approve and won't approve. So that process was, I guess, elongated, because before we could pick a brick, we had to make a recommendation, send it off to DHR, and then they would, within 30 days, they would tell us that's good to go, or nope, choose another color. And with the foundation being that we were going to have the Welcome Center, it was going to be a hub at the park and for the county. We had to make it safe. We had to make it ready and accessible for everyone. So that was a pretty important piece, and I think it was one of the bigger surprises to all of us. There are a lot of historic pieces to this puzzle of Fluvanna, of the history. The thing that I enjoy most is the bateau piece in the second floor, and really all the empty spaces, the empty spots that we have, to fill those with other local history artifacts, for us to be able to tell a story even more, because that gives folks an opportunity to talk about, oh, well, my great-grandfather had that, he had one of those, or it gives us another way to connect with the community. And from a staff standpoint, we get to talk to folks, learn daily. I think since we've had our soft openings, every time we've been in the house and talked to someone, whether they're from the county or from Charlottesville or Richmond, they have a story to add to the artifacts that we currently have. So it's kind of a cool, or it's really a cool place to be and witness different conversations going on and just listening.
It's truly been a pleasure to work with everybody on this project. To have a facility like this restored and made into a museum and a welcome center is truly a gem to the county, and it's something to be proud of. We're just glad to have family and friends visit and experience this with us today.
This is a special day. Restoring history is vital to any community, and this is extra special. And standing here on the porch and looking out, this site is just beautiful, and so many people are going to have the opportunity now to experience this building, experience the history inside, and for economic reasons, this is great for Fluvanna County. The addition to this and Pleasant Grove and all the other amenities that are slowly growing here, just can't say enough for staff and some of the dreams of the residents, a lot of the residents that live here, the Historical Society, especially Mr. Moss. Thank you very much.
I do hope it's going to hold off rain. I will try to be very quick. I'm not going to give you a complete history of how this all came about, but back in 2003, the Historical Society went to the Board of Supervisors and asked them if they would allow us to put the house on the National Register. We then restored the summer kitchen with grants from VDOT and money from the Heritage Trail and the Historical Society. And then we began work on designing the restoration of this house. And it was, we managed to do so with minimum expense to the county initially. The extension that was put on was designed by Doug Gilpin, a very famous architect in Charlottesville, at no cost to Fluvanna County, and it was built essentially as he drew it on the back of a napkin. So that became the beautiful addition that is there now. This is a collaborative project, a combination of the nonprofits, the Historical Society, the Heritage Trail Foundation, Fluvanna County. It's typical of the kind of collaborative efforts we have put into the development of certain amenities here at Pleasant Grove, including the picnic shelters, the Americans with Disability Act Trail, and many of the other things that you see here today. So of the total cost of this project, over $700,000 came from 2 VDOT grants and from 4 different grants that I helped raise for the Historical Society and the Heritage Trail. So 70% of this project was paid for by foundation grants, and I think maybe we ought to speed this up.
I served as the grants administrator on this project and want to express my gratitude for having had the opportunity to work with the Historical Society, the Heritage Trail Foundation, county staff, VDOT staff, who's been incredible on this project, and my sincere hope is that all the family members that are here today, as well as your ancestors, would appreciate what we've done with this building. Thank you.
Okay, everybody ready? 1, 2, 3. Look up, look up.
The historic part of the project is really significant to Fluvanna County, and being along the river is a great transportation history for us. We're just glad to participate in the project, and glad, along with the federal government, to be able to help fund this project.
Her father raised huge patches of cantaloupe and watermelon, and he was always sharing those with any family or friends that came through. Her mother did a lot of work helping hungry strangers who came through. This was back in the 30s when there was a lot of hungry strangers coming off the trains and traveling through. And anytime they stopped by, she was always willing to give them food, hand them a meal.
Daddy used to fish, and he would leave his lines in the river overnight, you know, and go down maybe the next day and have a tub full of fish, you know, any kind of fish, catfish and all kinds of, you know, fish. I remember that.
My great-great-great-grandfather built Pleasant Grove, and my great-great-grandfather was here as a small boy. There's a picture of him downstairs leaning against a tree with his father and mother in the background. And I've brought a picture today to share. His name was Ullenbruch George, and he was born in 1853. He's the only one of the brothers who didn't fight in the Confederate Army because he was too young. But he saw all the rest of his brothers go off to fight in the war. And he married a woman from Amherst, and when his parents died, he left Fluvanna because all the other brothers got farms, and he was the last one. I'm really very thrilled to be here today. Beautiful house. They've done wonderful things with it, and I know that it'll keep the Haden name alive in Fluvanna for generations to come.
Hi, I'm Eric Dahl. I'm the Director of Finance for Fluvanna County. My primary role in the project was just managing the overall budget of the project and just working with procurement, project management with Public Works, and as well as Daniel Company and the architects on this project.
And I'm L.J. Swain with Daniel and Company. I'm the executive vice president of the company and was a project manager here. And our company does a lot of historic preservation work, and this is just the type of work that we seek out. And it was a wonderful job. The county was so great to work with and made it all run very smoothly. this house is not set on a conventional footing like we're all used to these days. So the brick just goes down and sets on dirt. And when we excavated for the new addition over here, it undermined the brick walls, so to speak. So we had to essentially put footings under that section of wall.
As anyone can imagine, you're going to come into certain things that just come up unexpected along the process. It's an old house, but we worked our way through it with Daniels, and we got a great finished product.